From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on June 11th, 2026 from South Carolina Public Radio Studios here in Columbia. On this episode of The Lede, we look at what happened on primary election night.
Interesting.
I have a fun little package that I put together for you on that as well, and we will hear from folks on the trail, including the two Republican gubernatorial candidates in the June 23rd runoff. We all knew there was going to be a runoff. We all knew that. And they told you that. Also, we have analysis from Winthrop University political science professor Dr. Scott Huffmon and strategic communications consultant Rob Godfrey on the results and what happens next. A lot to take in here, folks. No wind down either. Yeah, sorry, keep psyching you guys out here, but that doesn't mean you can't call 803-563-7169. Tell me if you guys tuned in, saw my face on election night instead of just hearing my voice. You could listen to me speaking as fast as I possibly can, talking to Scott Huffmon and his dragon in the background. Also, maybe you heard me on NPR like Roman did out in Texas. 803-563-7169. Let us know what you think about the election results, the runoff, and more. Our dragon's real. 803-563-7169. All right, let's get into some primary results here. In the governor's race, on the Democratic side, Hopkins Representative Jermaine Johnson won the nomination outright with 60% of the vote, followed by Billy Webster and Mullins-McLeod. On the Republican side, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette got 29% of the vote, and Attorney General Alan Wilson came in with 26%. They advanced to a June 23rd runoff. The cannon fire for these. Congressman Ralph Norman came in at 17%, Businessman Ron Reddy at 14%, and Congresswoman Nancy Mace at 12%. Jason Belton is the Democratic nominee for Secretary of State and will face incumbent Mark Hammond in November. Vincent Coe bested Trav Robertson to get the Democratic nomination for Treasurer, and he'll face Curtis Loftus in November. On the Republican Attorney General's race, Georgetown Senator Stephen Goldfinch snagged 40% of the vote, and 8th Circuit Solicitor David Stumbo came in with 36%. They go to a runoff, and 1st Circuit Solicitor David Pasco was at 24%. Tiffany Boozer is the Democratic candidate for the Comptroller General. Sylvia Wright is the Democratic nominee for Superintendent of Education, and she faces off against Ellen Weaver in November. Now let's look at the Republican Commissioner for Agriculture race.
All right.
Trump endorsed Cody Simpson and Danny Ford are headed to a runoff. Big one. Dr. Annie Andrews is the Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate race and will face off against Senator Lindsey Graham, who once again dodged getting drawn into a runoff by getting 57% of the vote as he looks to win a fifth term this November.
Number 5.
In the 1st District, Nancy LaCour and Mac DeFord are facing off for the Democratic nomination, while Charleston County Councilwoman Jenny Costa-Honeycutt and Representative Mark Smith are also heading to a runoff for the Republican nomination. A lot going on in the 1st Congressional District. Former Congressman Mark Sanford, who dropped out of the race before this election weeks ago, came in 4th out of 11. He wasn't even campaigning, he came in 4th. That's name ID, folks. But let's look at the Republican governor's race now. So take it away, Twist Gavin. It became clear that Evette and Wilson were heading to a runoff, and more than 90 minutes after the polls closed, the two were addressing their supporters at their respective watch parties. Wilson brought a more unifying message.
I want to thank Ralph Norman, I want to thank Ron Reddy, because they each, like Nancy, brought unique aspects to this race. They brought a unique way of campaigning. It was different than mine. Okay? But it was unique to them, and they actually made me a better candidate. They made me appreciate this process so much more because it made me fight harder and work harder and appreciate it more. So thank you to them. Now, they're not moving forward in this race, but this is what I want to say to their supporters. To the supporters, the people out there who voted today for Nancy Mace, Ralph Norman, and Ron Reddy. 3 people who represented something to you, that inspired and sparked something in you. To the people who supported Nancy Mace, because she was the maverick who shook things up. You never knew what she was going to do or say, and you love that about her. There's a home for you in the Wilson campaign. To the Ralph Norman supporters out there who loved that Ralph Norman was a conservative juggernaut who challenged the establishment and the status quo. There is a home for you here. To those of you who supported Ron Reddy, the successful businessman, the plain-spoken outsider who brought a message of reform and something different, there is a home for you here in the Wilson campaign. I will fight for you. And I invite all of you who I wasn't your second choice coming into tonight, or I wasn't your first choice. I'm willing to be your second choice tomorrow morning. Give us the chance to fight for you, to fight for the ideals that you found so valuable in those other candidates. Let me be that standard bearer for you. I will carry that for you in the next 2 weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, as your next governor, Mike and I have talked about this. Our number one goal in everything that we do, our North Star, our true north, if you will be to make living in South Carolina more affordable for your families. To make our economy more profitable for your businesses, and to make our government more accountable to you. That is what I commit to you. I'm a 30-year combat veteran and a career prosecutor. I have fought in the courtrooms of this country for our constitutional rights and to put violent criminals behind prison, and I have fought on the battlefields of Iraq to defend and protect our Constitution and our way of life. I will bring that same courage, that same conviction, that same passion, that same desire to fight for you to the office of the governor if you will give me the chance. Hire me to be your next governor. I will be a fighter for you. We will fight to eliminate the income tax, reduce your property taxes, DOGE, fraud, waste, and abuse from government, promote a kids first education agenda, fix our crumbling roads and bridges, lower utility rates by bringing more energy into South Carolina, and having smart growth that respects the character of the communities that we live in. No more boondoggle deals that are cramming things down your throat. We're going to have a thoughtful government. We're not going to have the status quo anymore.
Evatt was already on the attack.
We're going to win this runoff election, but that is just the beginning. We're going to eliminate income tax. It's your money. It belongs in your pockets, not in Columbia. We're going to slash property taxes because no South Carolinian should ever be taxed out of their home. We're going to pass full universal school choice to give South Carolina's next generation the best education possible. And we're going to fix our roads. We will stop funding woke institutions, and we will end tenure once and for all. Get rid of radical professors who are trying to indoctrinate our kids. And we are going to stand up for conservative voices and conservative values. I have never, I will never back down to the woke mob. Over these next 2 weeks, we're going to highlight a very clear contrast between myself and a career politician. If you want a finger in the wind career politician who won't take a stand and who does the political thing and not the right thing, then you should excitedly vote for Alan Wilson. If you want someone who more than doubled his taxpayer-funded salary while you struggle to make ends meet, then Alan Wilson might be the guy for you. And if you want someone who has bankrolled his radical liberal corporates that spew DEI, then Alan Wilson is your guy. But if you want a business leader, a CEO, and someone who has spent their career outside of politics, I'm asking for your vote. If you want a Trump-endorsed, steel-spine conservative, then join our team. And if you want to put a stake in the woke DEI mob that tries to cancel conservatives every chance they get, then I'm your candidate. This is a simple choice. A choice between a career politician with no business experience who lines their pockets with your tax dollars, or a Trump-endorsed businesswoman and conservative who's going to take the fight to the radical left for you, the people of South Carolina.
All of this came after nearly a year of campaigning by both of them and by vanquishing others in the field of 6, and then 5 following Spartanburg Senator Josh Kimbrell's departure last week. Kimbrell threw his support behind Wilson and joined him on the trail days before in Greer. Congresswoman Nancy Mace came in 5th place in the race. Throughout the entire campaign, she went through staff, didn't have a campaign manager, held few events, and relied on earned media and social media for attention. She blamed her poor performance in part by not getting President Donald Trump's endorsement, though they've had a fraught relationship ever since she heavily criticized him for the January 6, 2021 insurrection attempt, which was just days after she was sworn into her first term. She also said that her vote on releasing the Epstein files was the real reason he didn't endorse her. Mace spent months attacking Wilson's character on social media, but spoke with a 4-term attorney general before he addressed supporters Tuesday evening. Winthrop political science professor Dr. Scott Huffmon reacted to the news on SCETV's Election Night show.
Pam Evatt has ready-made ammunition to pull up previous social media posts about Alan Wilson and juxtapose it with any positive thing she might say about Alan Wilson. We'll see Nancy Mace's previous social media in anything that she does to endorse Alan Wilson. So he's going to have to be very strategic, practically surgical in how he deploys her. And remember, she's getting the low double digits in votes. He can get name recognition and attention when she comes to an event, but compared to the rest of the field, she doesn't have a lot of voters to deliver. She can try and make a convincing argument as to why, other voters should not go to Evatt but go to Wilson. But, the best thing she can do is get eyes on Wilson, but she has to be careful because there's so much ammunition out there about things she's said before. And, I think grenades underestimate a description of some of the things she's tossed at him.
Like Wilson, Evatt was barnstorming during the final days of the trail, but with her boss and the man who launched her political career in 2018, Governor Henry McMaster.
Another thing, she and I have had 8 years together. I had 2 years without her, but the 8 ones with her have been a whole lot better than the ones without her. And she has gained experience that most people don't get to have. Used to be the governor and the lieutenant governor ran on a separate ticket, but this time I was the first governor that picked his running mate. Picked her once, picked her twice, and now I'm picking her for the 3rd time. And she has been with me. She has taught me things I did not know. We have worked together on policy matters, on issues from A to Z. At the chief executive of this state, working with the lieutenant governor, gives her an insight into things that others, frankly, don't have. That's important. She knows where we've been. We've worked together on the plans where we're going, and the new things going to be coming up. It's not always going to be the same. But with that kind of education and experience at the top executive level, that gives her an advantage that the others do not have.
The Evatt campaign spent the past 2 weeks on defense after Trump, in his endorsement post, claimed that McMaster's son would be on the ticket with her.
That's right. It's just speculation, and everybody's got entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. I don't know where all that's coming from.
Opponents like Congressman Ralph Norman pounced and called it a backroom deal and a coronation.
Well, I'll ask, I would just turn it back and say, talk to different people that like the Trump endorsement. You have some that don't like it. So it's all a matter of your perception. As a whole, I think it's a positive for Ms. Evatt. So, but everybody's got to make that choice. And Trump's not on the ballot here. Our names are on the ballot. And I will say he picked somebody that's not Trump-esque. Pamela hadn't done anything for 8 years, and as far as any type of accomplishment. But people have to make that call.
The coveted endorsement seemed to land like a thud. It also didn't translate into automatic support. Debbie Myers of Lexington was still sticking with Norman.
I wasn't really that surprised because Trump has made some really bad picks. And he doesn't live here, and he doesn't speak for me. I mean, I appreciate a lot that Trump has done. I've supported him, but he doesn't know South Carolina issues the way that someone who has lived here their whole life would know South Carolina issues. He has not seen what the state has become as far as the governance of it. And so I don't need him to tell me who to vote for. And we don't need a coronation, by the way. We need someone who earns her nomination instead of being hand-chosen.
Low Country businessman Rob Godfrey, who spent more than $5.5 million of his own money since jumping in the race on March 16th, came in fourth Tuesday evening. He held well-attended and well-appointed events around the state, from luxury hotels to the Beacon Drive-In in Spartanburg, where he kept up his ridicule of the political ruling class as he had taken to calling his opponents. His outsider status was attractive to his supporters, some of whom would have backed Norman, like Marie Urquhart.
Well, actually, Ralph Norman, I heard him speak, and I liked the fact that he was, for term limits and that sort of thing, but then I found out that he's been in politics for 20 years and hadn't done anything up to that point. I don't think he's going to start now.
As of Thursday, June 11th, Reddy had not endorsed, and it's not clear if he will after extolling strong principles for months. Evett and Wilson are in the final sprint, with turnout being crucial on June 23rd. Now for further analysis on what happened Tuesday night, I kick it off with Rob Godfrey. He's a strategic communications consultant who has worked for Governor Henry McMaster and Governor Nikki Haley, but he was neutral during this race. So we'll talk about the governor's race a lot and just start off with the Democrats because we do have a clear winner right there from last night, as well as the turnout I want to mention. It was a record 25% last night with 855,370 ballots cast. Of that, 37% was from that 2-week record-breaking early voting period, which was heavily driven by Democrats. This seemed to be part of a scenario that Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey was warning about, especially during that redistricting push, which dovetailed right at the start of early in-person voting and motivated Democrats, as we're seeing. But the big winner was Representative Jermaine Johnson. He won this outright, besting two very well-funded candidates, Billy Webster and Mullins McLeod, who spent millions of dollars. What did you make of this outcome for Johnson?
So I'd say a couple things. One, great job on behalf of the Democratic Party for turning out early voters. As far as Representative Johnson goes himself, look, Representative Johnson has done a lot of work over the last several years, dating back to his work with Andrew Yang's presidential campaign, to organize. He's well known among grassroots activists. He's done a lot of work traveling the state with his wife. They've been very visible. And while they haven't been as heavy on paid media as, say, Billy Webster was, you can't underscore the value in a state like South Carolina, where the governor's office in particular is one people put such a personal touch on with meeting face-to-face with voters, and Jermaine Johnson has done that over the last year or so that he's been a candidate.
Yeah, and he was also pressured to drop out of this race too, citing electability concerns, citing these fundraising concerns. He raised close to $500,000 compared to what we saw those other guys raise. He brought that up in his victory speech last night. So now, no doubt there'll be some moments of reconciliation among the Democrats and party insiders. But again, still very much an uphill battle for him and other statewide candidates, Democrats, going forward for November.
Sure. The numbers, as we saw in 2022, are very tough for statewide Democratic office holders. Governor McMaster won one of the most historic reelection margins that we've seen in decades, and there's no reason to believe that a Republican nominee for governor won't be in position to run up strong numbers again if they have the right message, if they have a team that works as hard as Governor McMaster's did, and they raise money. So I think that while Representative Johnson is certainly a compelling Democratic nominee in a number of ways, he has his work cut out for him, and I think he'd admit that too.
Switching to the Republicans, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evett and Attorney General Alan Wilson are now in a runoff. No one got that 50% plus one vote to avoid it. She got 29%. He came in at 26%. This is a scenario you and other folks were expecting. And when we look at that map from Tuesday night, where the votes were for this. Evett narrowly won a few of the upstate counties, which are critical, like Greenwood, Anderson, Oconee, and Spartanburg. She was third in her home county of Greenville, but that was only about a point behind Norman and Wilson there. She blew out Horry County, which we can talk about, with 50% of the vote, where that's obviously a Republican stronghold. A lot of folks who have recently relocated to the state live there as well. And she was also strong in some of the PD counties, but of course Wilson took the biggest PD county in Florence, with Senator Mike Rickenbach being the senator from that county, helping him carry there. And then the Low Country is more Wilson territory, as well as part of the Midlands, especially Lexington County, where Wilson's from. So tell me how you saw that map, especially when we maybe contrast it with the 2018 race for governor that you were part of, when we saw McMaster lose Greenville but win Horry County, and going into that runoff with John Warren. How do you contrast these two races when you look at that map?
The Attorney General's campaign absolutely did the work it needed to do to turn out its voters in the Midlands, his home area. His margin was impressive in Lexington County, his home county. And I think that's not expected. Anyone who's driven through Lexington County has felt that presence. And by the same token, the lieutenant governor did extremely well in Horry County, which was not unexpected. She spent a lot of time there. Mm-hmm. She has a lot of institutional support from elected officials there, and she knows a lot of the grassroots activists there and has done a lot of work there over the course of time. In the upstate, the Wilson campaign has to be happy with its finish in Greenville County, and in some of the ways that it cut into margins in the upstate. And so I think that what we're in for is a 2-week runoff, a sprint to the finish, that again is not unexpected, I think, heading into the final weekend, because I think the candidacies of Congressman Norman and Rom Reddy, while they ran good campaigns, I think they peaked a little bit earlier, because the conventional wisdom at the beginning of this campaign was that there were 2 lanes, one for a candidate who was cut from the cloth of the Attorney General and the Lieutenant Governor, statewide office holders who had institutional support, and an insurgent candidate like a Ralph Norman or a Rom Reddy. Mm-hmm. Those insurgent candidates, they peaked early for one reason or another, whether it was their message or whether it was their allocation of resources. And so I think we're in for a memorable runoff in true South Carolina fashion, but one where the candidates themselves are both seasoned candidates, mature candidates, who will undoubtedly throw, some policy punches in a debate and on TV because they have disagreements, but those largely will be forgotten once the race is over. It's usually the remarks and the nastiness from, emotionally overwrought supporters of those candidates, who take to social media and say things that are the hardest for some of the folks in those camps to forget. Yeah. But I think we're in for an entertaining 2 weeks.
And we've already seen that play out a lot too, living up to our reputation of being a blood sport for politics in South Carolina. But going to that, talk about Rom, talk about Ralph, talk about Nancy Mace, talk about that other lane. Where do those voters go? We already saw Congresswoman Nancy Mace throw her support behind Alan Wilson, who she just blasted all of last year on social media. Sure. And now she's right behind him. What does Evett have to do to pick up these other endorsements? Is that even in play?
So I think what you'll probably see today is two candidates who are tired, but they understand what's in front of them, a 2-week sprint. So what they're doing is they're going into the field today to test exactly where they are and where they have room to grow with voters. They're no doubt on the phone with people who were their former opponents, hoping to win them over, and in doing so, hoping to win over some of the supporters of some of those former opponents. And they're also charting out a very quick but important fundraising plan so that they can stay as close to parity on television with each other as possible, because paid media still matters, whether it's on traditional television, it's on streaming platforms, or it's digital advertising.
And what did you make of the Trump endorsement here, Rob? When you see that endorsement, should Evett have gotten more of that vote because of that endorsement, or was this where we thought it would be? And now what has to happen there for Trump to really come into play here with this runoff sprint?
President Trump's endorsement, like the endorsement of any sitting president of your party, is something that you want. and something that the Evatt team no doubt worked to secure over the course of the campaign. I think they made no secret about that. And, the question is whether that endorsement cinches any people who are on the fence now. I think that she and the Attorney General essentially tied last night, although she had, she slightly edged him. And, I think the open question is, because the president himself is a mercurial figure, to put it charitably, is what kind of skin in the game he'll put to try to help win this for the lieutenant governor. She said last night that he's all in to do whatever it takes. So I think that we're going to have to see what that looks like.
Yeah, we've up to this point had social media posts from him as well as a teletown hall on primary night eve. So again, we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. We're talking about the messaging. We did see two different speeches from Wilson and Evatt on Tuesday night. Evatt kind of really digging in on Allen already, whereas you saw Wilson kind of going a little bit more uniting and going forward. Is that what the messaging is going to look like for the next 2 weeks, you think?
I don't know that that's what the messaging is going to look like from both camps in the next 2 weeks. I don't think it was surprising to see the lieutenant governor attempt to draw a contrast between her and her opponent. But at the same time, I don't think it was surprising to see the attorney general be a bit more unifying in his speech, because they both have the same objective, which is to unite their former opponents behind them and to unite the supporters of their opponents behind them. I think that the Attorney General's objective was to do that last night, and the Lieutenant Governor's objective was to start that runoff as soon as possible.
Yeah, and we'll see a runoff debate at Coastal Carolina on June 16th, so that'll be fascinating because Evatt's only done one of the 4 debates of this cycle so far, and it's going to be both of them on stage, so there's not going to be incoming from other opponents there too. But Rob, really quickly, there were other races on the ballot. The AG's race is now going to a runoff between State Senator Stephen Goldfinch and 8th Circuit Solicitor David Stumbo, and there were also 124 State House seats on the ballot too, specifically a couple dozen races for the Republicans who have the supermajority in the chamber. Really quick, what were some of your other takeaways from the primary night?
I think it was a good night for the House Republican caucus and House leadership. There was only one incumbent Republican who I believe lost, and one incumbent Democrat. And there's another, and I think there's another race that's going to run off. Obviously, the Freedom Caucus members beat back challengers once again too. So I think that House leadership and the House Republican caucus held its own, as did members of the Freedom Caucus. And so, again, a good night to be an incumbent.
Gotcha. That's Rob Godfrey. He's a political communications strategist. Thank you very much, Rob. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you always, Gavin.
Find all that coverage and more at youtube.com/SCETV News. And that's it for the pod, folks. That's the show. But we'll be back for our special election, our runoff election night, June 23rd at 8 p.m. Tune in for that. It's going to be on the radio as well and our streaming platforms. But we got another week before now and then. We got another debate on June 16th. Not my debate, but someone else's. But we'll be there. We'll recap it for you going forward. Also, you can show us your appreciation by leaving us a review at Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from, or a voicemail at 803-563-7169. And you can stay up to date with the latest news on SCETV.org and SouthCarolinaPublicRadio.org. And don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lede is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. Cindy Wilcox is our intern. Jake's also here from Content. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lede, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina. I mean, what would you want to go do something else? You want to get something better to do?
I can't possibly
no, there's no way.
Be held to a higher standard than this.